Yes, it's a rather strange title, but let me explain. A little over a year ago, we made a video where I investigated whether Jesus existed in the Cars universe and all the strange things surrounding his existence. And well, in that investigation we touched on other very interesting topics, which I thought we didn't have more information about, and those topics were set aside and never revisited. Among those was the story of the development and origin of this planet. It's so strange because it's no secret to anyone how the world of Cars works in mysterious ways, with even its own creator, Matt Singer, explaining a nightmare scenario when asked where the machines came from. If you think about it, autonomous car technology is coming. We're reaching the point where you can sit in the car and it drives itself. Imagine that in the near future, cars become more and more intelligent. And one day they simply ask themselves, why do we need humans? They only slow us down. They're dead weight, let's get rid of them. But the car takes on the personality of the last person who drove it. Ah, look, there you have it. And even though with this we could make a video that the algorithm would love, titled The Dark and Disturbing Origin of the Cars Universe, or something just as ugly, the truth is that it was just a terrifying personal theory from Matt Singer, as if the Cars universe were a sequel to that disturbing Stephen King story about trucks enslaving humanity. The evidence seems to point in another direction, but you know what scares me more? Something that really surprised me is how the general timeline of the Cars universe, even though it's not really relevant in the movies, was designed and maintained with elements parallel to human history. In fact, the oldest specific point in the chronology, interestingly, isn't even found in the movies, shorts, or books, but was only briefly mentioned. Inside Car Finder, an extra minigame added to the main menu of the first movie's DVD, which gives us information about absolutely all its characters, whether they were important, secondary, or literally just dots on the screen. However, this is where we get the first specific date in the timeline, sometime in the 1800s, when tractors were domesticated, using their role in building the first transcontinental railroad as a reference, which has interesting implications when emphasizing the fact that tractors are animals and that they are used as beasts of burden. But beyond clarifying things, this is where everything becomes much more complicated for us because we encounter a paradox. Did the trains or the tracks come first? Because if we accept that there were trains before, without rails, they would have been enormous beasts without purpose, unable to move, useless in nature, whose fate in the food chain was to be easy prey, which would quickly become extinct. But if we consider that for the first time they created rails for a non-existent species, it is the activity itself that is stupid. That's why I think we need to propose a third option, and the strangest idea on which everything that follows will be built: the common evolutionary ancestor. The dilemma of the trains and the tractors is just the first in a long line of mysteries in natural evolution seen in this series of films. As we mentioned in that video about Jesus a little over a year ago, during Cars 2 we can see paintings and statues of ancient cars, with the statues in front of the Colosseum being the best representation of a car from hundreds of years ago in this universe. It seems this type of car dominated for centuries during the development of various civilizations in cars. But at the same time, we have all the mechanical animals seen in the Planes movies. It's a long list. In Cars 1, we see that tractors, harvesters, and bulldozers act as livestock. And there are also miniature Volkswagen Beetles that act as insects. In Planes 2, since it's set in a natural park, we also see birds, which are miniature planes, and deer, which are John Deere tractors. Even in the Crazy Mater short, there's a warning sign for crocodiles. In Cars 3, Cruz says on the beach she doesn't want to crush crabs, and in Mater Saves Christmas, snowmobiles act as Santa's reindeer. If we hadn't seen all the evidence in Cars 2 and the Car Finder that there was indeed a long civilizational history on this planet full of little cars, we could easily say that Matt Singer's theory is real and that the cars simply remade the entire Earth's biosphere in their own image. But the evidence points to something much more interesting. I know what I'm about to say sounds completely crazy, and you should be used to it by now. But the anatomy of the cars is very similar to that of humans. And we should consider the fact that, at least for the cars we see, the animators consider that their brains are not where the engine would be, but behind their doors. So they see them as mechanical creatures with an organic core or something like that. It's obvious that this is a shaky concept they didn't want to go too deep into, but just wanted to avoid destroying the magic of this universe. So I find it pretty strange that they decided to name the first episode of the Disney Cars series Dino Park. We briefly referenced this in that old video, but today we'll go a little deeper. Dino Park is a short episode that starts the road trip of Mater and McQueen, where they stop at a small dinosaur museum. Dinosaurs that McQueen knows a lot about because he loves documentaries about them. And he goes on to explain to Mater several things about these majestic creatures that ruled the world of cars millions of years ago before being destroyed by a meteorite. Majestic mechanical creatures which had wheels but still used them as feet, and whose fossils we can see directly in the museum. McQueen and the guide use phrases like the first grazing Dino trucks, compact theropod, and the sedans of the plains, which leave us with a lot of other questions, but confirm something very curious. Evolutionarily, they were always vehicles, which really helps our theory but now makes me think that, since Cars 2 revealed to us that they use fossil fuels coming from the remains of those same prehistoric creatures, and that cars don't just use gasoline, they actually eat it, does that mean they eat the remains of their ancestors? It would be like if we had tiny hamburgers made from caveman remains in real life. Putting aside that disturbing fact, all of this points to them actually having a common evolutionary ancestor. An evolutionary ancestor, which, believe it or not, we've already seen on screen. Yes, in that video about Jesus I mentioned a short from a now-ended channel found in Cars, Unmade Tales called Backwards to the Forward, where Mater goes back to the prehistoric era and meets stone wheels with eyes and a mouth. But that was deleted material, and at that time I didn't know that in the official material all the clues we need to find the true common evolutionary ancestor are already there. In episode 5 of the series, we come across the Whale Car Wash, which is a themed car wash shaped like a giant submarine. This reveals to us that whales are submarines. A very interesting detail, because in the first episode we briefly see a little sign that shows us the evolution in this world, and it directly shows that cars evolved from submarines. This would explain why all the animals look so similar physically, since they're all some version of a car. And it wraps up our mystery with a curious revelation. All the cars, and by the way the planes too, in Cars, evolved from prehistoric submarines. Although that doesn't mean that all life in this world came from there. And some strange details indicate that there is biological life, organic life, with the first and most obvious being the sushi that they serve to Mater in Cars 2, considering that at no other point in the franchise has real food been seen, except for this exclusive Japanese bar, and they almost always consume motor oil or gasoline. This seems to be something similar to molecular gastronomy in our world, a very exotic food made from animal protein. And that's the other really strange detail. During the first movie, we see organic birds when Mac and McQueen drive on Interstate 40, so it's definitely confirmed that there are still strange organic creatures in this world. In fact, we can add the little bee from the 2005 trailer for Cars 1, the image of the Dinosaur, which clearly isn't one of those mechanized dinosaurs. And actually, at the end of Cars 1, there's a big trailer with a few plastic flamingos around it. And that's the last big plot twist. Even though in Cars, everything in Cars is made up of little cars, and we have very solid evidence that their entire natural history comes from a very strange but consistent biotechnological evolution for more than 50 million years. Starting first with submarine whales, then with motorized dinosaurs, there are also organic animals, even though the species seen on screen are very few. There were also normal dinosaurs, there are fish like the ones in our world, and there are also birds and even regular flamingos, somewhere in a remote corner of the world. And I still don't know if this is indicative of a deeper conspiracy, but it is. We'll find out in an upcoming video, so I hope you enjoyed this scientific and evolutionary video. Relax if you did, subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you in another supercalifragilisticexpialidocious video. Goodbye.